All right, so during this little section here, we're going to be setting up some of the assets that we're going to be using to scatter around using Unreal's foliage system. Even though we're not going to be using foliage for it, we're going to be using debris. So the way the foliage kind of actors tend to work inside of Unreal is it allows you to basically force a single draw call on a bunch of meshes. Now, we can manually do that as well, but this allows it in a single tool. What does that mean? This is a fancy way of saying that when the graphics card or the GPU goes to render one asset, the texture fetch, everything for maybe it's thousands of them, all happen instantly. I'm not exactly sure if that how it handles culling. I'm sure there's still some culling that goes on, but everything's drawn at once. It's different than object instancing. It's a little bit different than object instancing, but it's a really fast way to draw a bunch of meshes. The thing that you want to remember when you're using it is to make the meshes light and cheap. You know, foliage, plants, but you can use it for debris as well. So, you know, we're going to jump through that, and you'll see, you know, it won't be in this video, but in the next video, probably the next video or so, where we actually implement it on the engine side. But this is going to be focusing on creating the asset for it. We'll also be atlasing all of the debris tiles as well, so they'll all be batched off of a single sheet, texture sheet as well, again, to save memory, to save draw calls and whatnot. So I will let this play through, and you guys can kind of see how, obviously, you know, the asset creation. If you guys are not interested in that, then, you know, jump on through to the next videos or whatever. Again, this is going to be asset creation for the individual foliage actors, or for the tiling, or for basically the individual rubble pieces. So hopefully you guys find some stuff you can use and enjoy, and I'll talk back at you.
Feeling my way through the darkness, guided by a beating heart. I can't tell where the journey will end, but I know where to start. They tell me I'm too young to understand. They say I'm caught up in a dream. Well, life will pass me by if I don't open up my eyes. So that's fine by me. So wake me up when it's all over, when I'm wiser and I'm older. All this time I was finding myself enough, didn't know I was lost. So wake me up when it's all over, when I'm wiser and I'm older. All this time I was finding myself enough, didn't know I was lost. I tried carrying the weight of the world, but I only have two hands. Hope I get a chance to travel the world, but I don't have any plans. Wish that I could stay forever this young, not afraid to close my eyes. Life's a game made for everyone, and love is the prize. So wake me up when it's all over, when I'm wiser and I'm older. All this time I was finding myself, and I didn't know I was lost. So wake me up when it's all over, when I'm wiser In my hands I hold the ashes. In my veins black pitch run. In my chest black catches. In my way setting sun. Dark clouds get around me. To the west, I'm so bound that I will go on ahead free. There's a light yet to be found. Last pale light in the west. Last pale light in the west. And I ask no redemption in this cold, barren place. Still I see a faint reflection, and so by it, got my way. Last pale light in the west. Last pale light in the west. I don't want to hear about it anymore. It's a shame I've got to live without you anymore. There's a fire in my heart, a pounding in my brains, driving me crazy. We don't need to talk about it anymore. Yesterday's just a memory. Then we close the door. I just made one mistake. I didn't know what to say when you called me baby. winds his lines up flowing towards the boiling sun. And when I touched her skin, my fingers ran with blood. In the hushing dusk, It's a Main Street Day parade. The night of the living dead is on its way. With the credit report for duty call. It's a lifetime guarantee. Stuffed in a coffin, 10% more free. Red light special at the mausoleum. Give me something that I need. Satisfaction guaranteed to you. What's the consolation price? Economy side, dreams of hope. When I was a kid, I thought I wanted all the things that I haven't got.
So there's a couple different ways to handle the actual atlasing of these textures. Right now, this is the manual way of doing it. We don't have enough assets to really make it valid for me to necessarily go through and do the automated way, but the automated way essentially would require you to make a secondary UV set and to bake those textures of the multiple assets onto that secondary UV set. That secondary UV set would contain all the UVs of however many assets you have that have then been atlased or auto-packed or however you want to call it. And since you're doing a UV transfer from UV1 to UV2, just in terms of texture space, when you transfer the UVs from UV set 2 from the multiple assets back to UV set 1, you then have a texture sheet that corresponds to multiple assets. I'm essentially doing that, but I'm doing that via Photoshop. So I know that's a very winded way of saying it, but once you guys see it in practice, it's very straightforward, and it's a very efficient way to reduce batching. If you find yourself, especially for VR stuff, if you find yourself drawing a number of assets or you have a bunch of assets you need to get, that you really just need to shove through the pipe and you're really asset bound, one of the ways to help that is to batch the textures as well. You can basically substantially reduce draw calls, because if you have 5 assets on one texture sheet, even though you're doing the roughness, you could even combine and do the RMA thing where you're doing the roughness metallic ambient occlusion. If you have that, you have basically just a diffuse and a normal with the RMA texture, and that can correspond to maybe 5 different assets. And the trade-off would be is you would use a slightly larger texture. Instead of a 512 or a 1024, maybe a 2048 or a 4096 for the albedo, just because it's going to be shared across so many different assets. Therefore, the actual texel space that each asset gets is going to be less, so it's a trade-off. There's also shader stuff that you can do to deal with that as well. And the shader side stuff requires material masking and whatnot, or even masking within the shader on the diffuser albedo. Just depends on what you're doing. It depends on the kind of rubble and stuff you're using as well. I know that's a lot, but it is a lot, so sorry. And yeah, we're just going to go through and do the straight texturing process here. One thing I will say, if you're combining assets and you bring it into Endu, unless you really intentionally want there to be multiple texture sets, combine everything inside of one and assign a single shader to it, and then export it via FBX or an OBJ or whatever you're using. That way, Quixel doesn't suddenly go, oh, you actually have multiple texture sets you want us to do. It slows it down pretty bad. I actually don't use that method of working, even if I need multiple texture sets. Yeah, so these 3D viewers always make everything look really nice, so it's cool to kind of see it. I'm like, oh, that's neat. But again, this is just a way to be a bit more optimal with things, is to start atlasing. Now, again, because we're not doing anything fancy on the shader side, in game, you could reasonably do this for different material types as well. Basically, if you had a bunch of concrete stuff, you could do that as well. There are a few assets that I think I go in and do. I don't think I actually have the recordings of it. And I'm sure some of you are like, thank God, no more recordings. But it does help, and it's also a nice organizational thing. You know, it's nothing really new though. That technique, that atlasing and batching of textures, has been used for a really long time in games in general. Like the Silent Hill stuff used it for all of their textures. Rage used it. It's essentially mega texturing, like not really just mega texturing, but essentially that's how mega texturing works. Is it takes a bunch of UV assets and splats them down on a huge ass texture, right? Like 8K or multiple 8K textures. You know, and there are some restrictions on that. Like there are some things that it can be pretty heavy on. You know, when people talk about like video RAM, you know, like Unreal defaults to I think using about a maximum of 4 gigs of video RAM. And basically what that is essentially there's a bunch of things that get pushed into that. You know, different frame buffers and that kind of thing get pushed in the GPU in terms of the video RAM. But it's also the amount of textures that you can fit on to the video card at a given time. So, you know, you can kind of do the math, right? I don't actually have the breakdown of the megabytes of the textures, but you start dumping in a couple 8K textures, a couple 4K textures, you know, you fill that space pretty quick, and it doesn't seem like you would, but you really do. You know, I think like on like a 980, you could probably fit like maybe 12 8K textures or whatever on there. Not that I'm advocating that you do that, but it, you know, if you're going to do the batching and stuff, there needs to be a trade-off. You either have so many effing assets that having multiple shaders and stuff is just going to kill you on your texture fetching and your actual draw call, so you start to batch stuff. Sometimes that's what you got to do. All right, guys. This video is almost up, so we'll just keep pushing on until we get to the end. We're getting closer, so hang in there.